Need room to roam. Okay, so before I start, how many of you have come to an event with me before? Anyone? How many of you have read any of my books? How many of you have at least heard of my books? How many of you have no idea who I am or why I'm here? That's good. There were like 6 at the last one. You're converts by the end. Okay, so I debated for a long time what I was going to talk about on this book tour because you guys may have noticed that my books are kind of difficult to pass the elevator test. Do you know what I mean? Like when someone's in an elevator with you and they see that you're holding a book and they're like, what's it about? And you tell them and you have 2 floors to tell them what it's about. It wasn't bad with my first novels because I could just say, ding, oh yeah, I write books about, homicidal fairies set in modern day. Done! And out they go. And then it wasn't even so bad for the Sugar trilogy because, you get into the elevator, you tell people it's about, werewolves kissing. Done! And then I wrote the Scorpio races, and it was about killer water horses coming out of the ocean, and people catch them, and they sometimes ride them in horse races, and people die. And then the people are clawing at the elevator trying to get out. And then by the time I got to the Raven cycle, to the Raven boys, now when people ask me what I write about, I just tell them a combination of appealing adjectives and nouns. I'm like, it's about witch boys and dead Welsh kings, psychics, fast cars, magic, go! And the sequel! But that's not a really good thing to talk about on tour. So I guess the only thing that I'm going to say about the Dream Thieves is I'm going to talk really briefly about 3 of the characters in it. And then I'm going to read a scene, and I'm going to probably ask for some audience participation in this scene. And then I'm going to open up the floor for questions. Does that sound good? Say yes.
Yes.
Okay. So really, this book, wait, how many of you have read The Raven Boys? Okay. I'm going to try to be not so spoilers. Alright, so this book really looks at Ronan, who in the first book, as you will recall, is not a very nice person. I mean, he has a few positive attributes, such as he's brave and loyal, and we're done. So this focuses on him, and the thing about Ronan that really intrigues me is that I share a lot of DNA with Ronan. When I'm creating my characters, I always start out with an actual human mold, and then I change things about until I get the character that I want. It's kind of like if you're doing a fantasy illustration. It doesn't matter if you're illustrating, I don't know, a giant horned winged fairy. You still have a human come into your studio to be your model, and then you change it. I was a horrible, horrible person when I was a teen, and Ronan is kind of a horrible, horrible person, and we're not the same, but I'd say our arm bones might be the same still, maybe, possibly. And so I wanted to look at a character like Ronan from the inside so you could see how he got the way that he got. Of course, I didn't really have the same excuses as him because my father wasn't beaten to death with a tire iron, and also I don't pull things out of my dreams, but still, I had good reasons, surely. Alright, so that's the first character that this book is really about. And to look further inside Ronan, I brought to light another terrible character, a boy from Abruptly, the rich school that they go to. And mostly I like to write characters who have a secret heart of gold. I like to write like the frosty, popular girl with a heart of gold. Or the drugged out rock star with a heart of gold. The hitman with a heart of gold. And so I knew when I introduced Kavinsky, who is supposed to be a fellow student and street racer, that I was going to be horribly tempted to give him a heart of gold. So he represented one of my most huge challenges in writing a character because I could not make him secretly not Kavinsky. He had to be himself throughout the whole thing. What else do I want to tell you about him? Well, so in the book, he's a terrible street racer and he brings out the worst in Ronan. And the worst thing about Kavinsky for me writing him is that I had to go to the Mitsubishi dealership to do some research because he drove Mitsubishi and I accidentally bought one. And then things just kind of snowballed and I bought a race car and I did some national races and then I accidentally sold the race car and then I had a race car shaped hole in my heart and I was forced to buy miniature silky fainting goats. I mean, this is dominoes scenario. Anyway, I still live in Mitsubishi, and Kavinsky has a knife painted on the side of his. And so, on a lark, I painted a knife on the side of mine, and so I drove it to my launch party in Kansas City last week. Did any of you guys see the effects of this online? Yes. So I asked readers if they wanted to paint one side while I was there. I brought my spray cans and my tarp and everything else, parked it out front, and I let them go to town while I was signing. And I had no idea what they were doing while I was signing. And so I was sitting there. I just had my friend Natalie, who was videoing the whole thing and protecting the car's innocence. And I'm inside signing, and I had no idea what they're painting. And remember, I had to drive it 15 hours back from Kansas City to Virginia with whatever they have put on it. And at one point, the store owner comes in and goes, "They're sharpieing on the side of your car, is that fine?" "Have they already started?" "Yeah." I'm like, "Well, it's permanent marker, so it's fine." And people would come through the line and they would say things like, "I just painted an abstract dachshund on the side of your car." And so when I get out there, oh, I should back up, because right before I got out there, I'm going to change the names for this, and I cut it out of the video, because there's a video of readers spray painting it. I changed the name and cut out the video to save the identities of the people involved, but at one point a very large and drunken group came in, and they said, "Hey, are you famous? There's a famous person outside on the sidewalk now." "Oh, bet." They said, "Yeah, so this lady, how much do we have to pay you to be able to paint 'Got Milk' on your car?" And then they told me who she was. I'm not going to tell you who she was, but I'm going to let you know that she makes some laws, and that her title starts with Deputy Director of. So they said, "How much will it take to let you paint 'Got Milk' on your car?" And I said, "You have to buy a hardcover." They bought a hardcover, and I went outside, and sure enough, across my hood they had painted "Got Milk," and on the tail they had painted "We love cows." Also, my friend had been unable to stop one hoodlum who had stopped and seen the spray paint and had picked up the spray paint and very deftly painted a gang sign on the side of my car, which indicated, which he explained afterwards, that you could find drugs in the left rear well. I think that's all I'm going to say about Kavinsky. I think we're going to move on. All right, so the third character who gets introduced in this book is the Gray Man. He is the benevolent hitman who is coming to town looking for an object, which he has heard about. Supposedly, it will let the person take their things out of dreams. He doesn't know yet that it is a person that he's looking for and not an object. So the scene I'm going to read is the scene where the Gray Man first meets up with Blue's family. Blue's the girl from the first book. Her parents are all psychics, and I think that's all the backstory you need. Now, I'm going to need a couple of readers. I don't know, my brother was supposed to be here. Is he here yet? No. Okay, so I'm going to ask for 3 volunteers to read voices. There's 1, there's 2, and 3. You have to, no, I have it. Talk amongst yourselves. This is my itinerary, in case you're wondering. All right. Say something out loud. Hi. Say something. Hello. Say something. What's up? Ha! Alrighty. Here we go. You are definitely Mr. Gray. You are definitely Persephone. You're going to be Carol. That's just so true. All right. I'll be me. Come up so they can see your friendly faces. Kelly Marco. There you go. Mr. Gray, you get this. Mr. Gray, stand on my left. Is this the right book? I don't think you actually need any backstory for this. It stands pretty much alone. Ladies, are you ready? I have highlighted, I believe.
I love my first line.
You love your first line? Excellent. Is it yes?
It's...
I might have missed some of them, so look carefully.
Okay.
All right. Chapter 14. You could ask anyone. 300 Foxway, Henrietta, Virginia was the place to go for the spiritual, the unseen, the mysterious, and the yet to occur. For a not unreasonable fee, any of the women under its roof would read your palm, pull your cards, cleanse your energy, connect you with deceased relatives, or listen to the dreadful week you had just lived through. During the business day, clairvoyance was often work. But on days off, when the mixed drinks emerged, it often became a game. Mora, Calla, and Persephone scavenged the house for magazines, books, cereal boxes, old decks of tarot cards, anything with words or images. One woman selected an image and hid it from the others, and the other two experimented with how accurate they could get their guesses. They made predictions with their backs to one another, with the cards displayed, with different numbers of candles on the table, while standing in buckets of water, caught up and down 3 or 7 stairs from the front hallway. Mora called it continuing education. Calla called it turning tricks. Persephone called it the thing you can do when you're having on television. That day, after Blue and Gansey and Adam had gone, there was no work to be done. Sundays were quiet even for non-churchgoers. It wasn't that the women of 300 Foxway were spiritual on Sunday. It was that they were spiritual every day, and so Sunday didn't particularly stand out. After the teens had left the house, the women abandoned work and set up the game in the shabby but comfortable living room.
I'm barely nearly drunk enough to be transcendent.
Calla said after a space. She was not the only psychic drinking, but she was the closest one to transcendence. Persephone peered dubiously into the bottom of her own glass. In a very small voice, her voice was always small, she said sadly, Mora offered, "It's the Russian in you." At that moment, the doorbell rang. Mora swore delicately, one well-chosen and highly specific word. Calla swore indelicately, several more words with rather fewer syllables. Then Mora went for the front door and reappeared in the living room with a tall man. He was very gray. He wore a dark gray V-neck t-shirt and emphasized the muscular slope to his shoulders. His spikes were a deeper gray. His hair was an ashy blonde, drained of color, and so was the fashionable week-old facial hair around his mouth. Even his irises were gray. It escaped none of the women in the room that he was handsome. "This is Mr. He smiled in a knowing sort of way. "Gray." All the women's mouths twisted into their own knowing sort of smile. Mora said, "He wanted a reading."
We're closed.
That is rude. We are not close, but we're busy.
This was said with a question in her voice and an anxious glance towards Mora. "That's what I told him," Mora said. "However, it turns out that Mr. Gray doesn't really need a reading. He's a novelist, researching psychics. He just wants to observe." Calla rattled the ice in her glass. One of her eyebrows looked exceptionally skeptical.
What do you write, Mr. Gray?
He smiled easily at her. They noticed he had extraordinarily straight teeth.
Thrillers.
Do you read much?
She merely hissed and tipped her glass toward him, a plump lip mark first. "Do you mind if he stays?" Mora asked. "He knows poetry." Calla sneered.
Give me a stanza and I'll fetch you a drink.
Without the slightest hesitation or suggestion of self-consciousness, the gray man placed his hands in the pockets of his dark gray slacks and said,
Where hath gone the steed? Where has gone the youth? Where has gone the giver of treasure? Where are the feasting seats? Where the revelry in the hall? Alas, bright goblet, alas, mailed warrior, alas, prince's glory. How that time has passed away, obscured beneath the crown of night as it never were. Do it in the original Old English and I'll put alcohol in your drink.
He did. Calla went to get him a drink. After she had returned and the gray man had been encouraged to sit on the worn couch, Mora said, "I'll warn you, if you try anything, Calla has mace." By way of demonstration, Calla handed him his drink and then removed a small black container of pepper spray from her small red purse. Mora gestured toward the third member of their group. "And Persephone is Russian." And Mora made an extremely convincing fist. "I know how to punch a man's nose into his brain."
What a coincidence.
So do I.
He watched with an attentiveness both polite and flattering as Mora scraped the cards up from the sofa cushions. He leaned to pick up one she had missed.
This fellow looks unhappy.
The art depicted a man struck with 10 swords. The victim lay on his face, as most people did after being struck with 10 swords. That's a fellow after Cal's done with him, Mora said. Good news for him is that the 10s represent the end of a cycle. That card represents the absolute worst it'll get.
Does seem like there's not much worse than 10 points in your back and dust in your mouth.
Look, Mora said. His face looks a little like yours. The gray man studied the card. He placed his finger on the blade rammed through the victim's back.
And that's what looks a little bit like you.
He glanced at Mora. It was a glance. She glanced back. It was also a glance.
Well,
Would you do the honor, Mr. Gray? Mora handed him the deck of cards. You'll have to ask top or bottom. Mr. Gray gravely accepted the responsibility. He asked Calla, top or bottom?
3 of cups. And top, of course. The only place to be.
Mr. Gray removed the card from the top and turned it over. Of course, it was the 3 of cups. Mora grinned. She said, Empress, bottom. The gray man removed the card from the bottom and showed it to the room. The Empress's gown was suggested with a liberal spread of charcoal, and her crown was studded with inky fruit or jewels. The gray man clapped slowly.
4 of wands, bottom.
10 of coins, top.
Ace of cups, bottom.
The sun, bottom.
4 of swords, top.
The gray man flipped the cards again and again, revealing the correct predictions. Persephone's quiet voice cut through Mora's and Calla's increasingly loud competition.
King of Swords.
Everyone turned to look at Persephone, who sat with her knees together and her hands folded neatly in her lap. Occasionally, Persephone appeared both 8 years old and 80 at once. Now was one of those times. The gray man's hand hovered obediently over the deck.
Top or bottom.
16 cards from the top, I believe.
Mora and Calla both raised an eyebrow. Calla went up farther. The gray man carefully counted the cards, double-checked his count, and then turned over the 16th card for the others to see. The King of Swords, master of his own emotions, master of his own intellect, master of reason, gazed out at them. Expression inscrutable.
That's Mr. Gray's card.
Mora asked, sure. At a wordless agreement from Persephone, Mora turned to the gray man. Do you think that's your card?
I don't know much about tarot. Is it a terrible card?
No card's a terrible card, Mora said. She eyed the gray man, fitting the King of Swords into the man before her. And the interpretation can be very different in each reading, but the King of Swords is a powerful card. He's strong but impartial. Cold. He is very, very good about making decisions based upon fact instead of emotion. No, it's not a terrible card, but I'm picking up something else off it. Something like
Violence.
It was a word that had an immediate effect on everyone in the room. Yes, violence, Mora said. Is that what you meant, Persephone? Yes. All 3 of them had leaned unconsciously toward one another. Sometimes Mora, Persephone, and Calla seemed more like 3 parts of the same entity instead of 3 separate women. The 3 of them turned as one to Mr. Gray.
My work is sometimes violent.
I thought you said you were researching a novel. Mora's tone was more than a little prickly.
That was a lie. I'm sorry. I had to think quickly when you said I couldn't have a reading.
So what's the truth?
I'm a hitman.
This confession ushered in several moments of silence. The gray man's answer seemed very flippant, but his voice suggested otherwise. It was a sort of answer that required an immediate clarification or qualification, but he offered none. Mora said, "That's not very funny."
No, it's not.
Everyone in the room was waiting for Mora's response. "And does work bring you here tonight?"
Just research.
"For work?"
Everything is research for work in its way.
He did absolutely nothing to make his words easier to accept. It was impossible to tell if he was asking them to believe him, or to humor him, or to fear him. He merely laid out his confession and waited. Finally, Mora said, "Might be nice to have someone a bit later than Calla in the room for a change." They all had another drink. The gray man asked knowledgeable questions full of wry humor. Sometime later, he stood, took everyone's empty glasses to the kitchen, and excused himself with a glance at his watch.
Not that I wouldn't like to stay.
Then he asked if he could return later in the week. And Mora said yes. After he had gone, Calla looked through his wallet, which she had stolen as he left.
The idea is fake. But on Mrs. credit cards, why ever did you say yes?
Makes me feel better if I can keep my eye on it.
I think we all know what you're keeping your eye on.
Okay, so this is the part where I ask you guys if you have any questions or comments, and you all stare at me like you're rabid raccoons. Do you guys have any questions or comments? Ah, yes, Mr. Gray.
Did you drive? Did you drive an Mitsubishi here?
I have a very long, protracted story about this. Okay, so I was not entirely honest with my readers when I let them think that there would be hoodlums in Kansas City, because the spray paint that I gave them was not truly spray paint, but rather Plasti Dip, which when it dries, after being applied by 4 coats or more, can be peeled off laboriously. So I drove 15 hours back because, true to the spirit of the event, it had to come to St. Louis and to Virginia Beach. And then when I got home, I sat there, and in my few days home, I had 2, I started to work on taking out the gang sign, because that's the only car I have, and I have to take it to the grocery store. So I was sitting there, and in some places there was only like one coat, and so I had to put more coats on. And then in some places, it was stuck into cracks, and so I had to use this stuff that was called Terminator, which was actually just aerosolized gasoline. And so at this point, I'm sitting there, and the landscape guys arrive, and I'm sitting on the concrete spray painting the side of my car, and they're like, "We're gonna cut down your hostas now because they're spent for the season?" I'm like, "Yeah, thanks." And at that point, the goats broke free. So they come over, they're like, "Lady, it's not our fault, okay? I mean, it's just, look, this bush, it's not our fault, okay? We are shaping it, and they are." And sure enough, you can see, they love Japanese maples, and they're eating the hell out of the bottom of it. And so the top looked perfect, the bottom goes. And so I'm like, "Oh, that's fine, I can't stop them, I gotta..." And so I go back to spray painting this. Now the goats, they love me very dearly, and so once they saw that I was sitting on the ground, they all had to be assembled all around me. There's 5 of them, and they're miniatures, so they're small. And so I'm sitting on the ground, and it's Mitsubishi size. It's like a car, okay? So it's taking me some time to put 4 coats on there. It's all red, and the thing is, the cloud, or the car is kind of surrounded with this cloud of noxious fumes of spray paint and gasoline, and I'm telling the landscape guys, I'm like, "Don't smoke over here! It's all gonna go off!" And the goats start to act slightly altered. And so, I mean, they're always goats anyway, but they're starting to butt each other, and they're running